Okay, so like I said, last class we kind of did, and I can bring it up here. Let's bring it up here. Oh, really? Okay, so last class we kind of covered 3.7. Again, mostly it was about using the tabbed way of navigation, which seems very popular. If you looked at some of your apps in the App Store, or if you download, remember, even the ones that are built into your phone or your iPad, you know, a lot of people use the tab menu. Okay, so it comes popular. In addition, we also made our own icon. If you remember, I did make a separate video right before I left on Monday. If you haven't seen that, it was most of us have already left by then. But if we go to the, and I haven't linked it up yet, but if we go to YouTube, and of course, the most famous channel of all is Cool to Film. And if you go there, you'll see there is a video making the icon right here. So it's really short, and it covers all the steps I did from stealing the icon from the Noun project, going to Illustrator, making the size properly, saving it, and importing it into Xcode. So it's a really short one. It's only 9 minutes, so I kind of did it all kind of quickly. So if you want to review how to make the icon again, there is a special video for just making the icon right there. And then, of course, this was the whole rainbow project we did last class, again, which was chapter 3.7. And it basically goes over how to do the tabbed menu, which was chapter 3.7, which is very popular. This next chapter I'm going to talk about right now will be 3.8. Again, it's 3.8. And the whole chapter of 3.8 is just about how to do the navigation and how to do it properly so that things load and unload and content loads in at the appropriate time. So there's different ways to, and I can bring it up here. Where are we at? No, we don't need that. Where's my Xcode? There we go. So I just started a project in Xcode, and I called it Lifecycle. So I just opened up Xcode and typed in Lifecycle, and it's just a single view application. And so this side will be the computer, that side will be the book over there. So if we go to the next page, the main part of this is the when you go from one view controller to the other, either in the tab menu or in the table menu, you have different ways and different times to load things. And so they have 5 of them here. And so we're used to seeing, Viewdidload, right? Most of the time. Well, there's other ones besides Viewdidload. And they have view not loaded, view appearing, view appeared, view disappearing, and view disappeared. And so all these can be called inside of your Swift file in your view controller area to be able to pull data, have it refresh, right? Somebody's walking around, right, with their iPhone in their hand, and it constantly updates, right? Well, maybe you want your, especially, the GPS, right? So you might need to call that while they're in the app as they're moving around to have that constant update, right? So you can use things, and it's just not Viewdidload. You might need to call that while they're using the app or something like that. Or when they're leaving, let's say they're listening to a music, right, in an app, and they close the app or they go to another view controller to, let's say, a play button. You want the music to automatically stop, right? So you can do that in view disappearing or view disappeared. Hey, I hit ways of controlling that. That's what this chapter is about. So let's get started. Again, I just opened up a plain Xcode project and I called it the life cycle. And so we can read a little bit from the book here, a little bit. When you're finished setting up views and view hierarchy, you'll need to move to writing the logic behind your app. Your view controller classes are responsible for displaying your user data and handling user interactions. In the Light project, you used a UI view controller subclass to manage the button tapping event through actions and updated the view's background color accordingly. A view controller also controls the creation of its views, handles events based on the state of the view as it progresses through its life cycle, the disposals of the views when no longer needed. So again, the life cycle is all these different options that you can call during the view being loaded and unloaded. And you can see the different states there. Let's turn the page. You've probably noticed a pattern in the method names. Once the view is loaded, the method comes in pairs, will and did. And so if you remember from the, if you look underneath the Swift file, and if you look at it right there, you'll see a couple things that they talk about. You'll see a did right there, right? And so on. You also see the override right there. Okay, override is very important. We'll talk about override in this chapter as well. In that, of course, it's overriding maybe a current view did load, right? Maybe there's a view did load from somewhere else, and I need to override the view did load, right? I'm going from one to the other or something like that. So they do talk a little bit about the override as well. This standard Apple design pattern allows you to write code before and after the name events occurred. However, it's important to note that it's possible to have a will callback without corresponding did callback. For example, view will disappear could be called without view did disappear ever happening. So I guess there's a will. While every app is different, you'll learn the guidelines for each of the view controllers, lifecycle method, and the specific types of tasks associated with them. To gain tangible experience with the view controller lifecycle, you'll build an app that prints messages to the console describing each lifecycle method as it's called. You can learn more about different lifecycle methods as you'll add to the project. So again, this is not really a dynamic kind of tutorial here. It's pretty boring, but it's to see where these things happen and what order do they happen as well, right? Because you're not going to have something disappear until something is loaded, right? So there is certain hierarchy to how things are loaded and unloaded. After you've initiated a view controller, whether from a storyboard or from programmably, the view controller will load the view into memory. This process creates a view that controller will manage. So again, after a view controller has finished loading particular views, it aptly named Viewdidload function is called, giving the controller a chance to perform work that depends on the view being loaded and ready. So again, we got the Viewdidloaded right here. So you can do things before as well, and so on. For example, in the Light update UI was called to sync the background color of the view with a light on state. Other types of setup tasks to perform in Viewdidload include additional initialization of views, network request, and database access. So again, they tell you to open up Xcode and call it lifecycle. So that's what I've done already. I'm moving on. I'm turning the page. And so here we are in the main storyboard right here. They talk about to get to the code, and I know we're used to clicking right there to get to the code, but in this tutorial they talk about, here's how they tell you to get to the code. They tell you to click on the view here, if I can turn it blue like that, and then go up here to the class right here and click on this arrow right here. That's just what they're talking about at the top of page 377, and of course it brings up the code right there. So whatever, either way, to get to the Swift file. I think the reason why they're kind of telling you to do that is because again, you'll be having multiple views, and so you'll have multiple Swift files with different ones. Like later in this example, we'll make two view controllers, and of course you got to make sure that up here, whenever you're on the storyboard here, the proper view controller is here. So this is a very important window, I guess, is what they're trying to point out there, in that this, whatever is named here, is the one that's controlling the view. I think that's one reason why they kind of have you go into the Swift file here instead of just clicking on it here, because you could have more than one over here, right? You're going to have one for each view. So to make sure that you have the proper Swift file per view, they're explaining that you click here, and then, oh, here it is right there. This is the one that's controlling this one, and then click on this arrow there, and hey, that is the proper one that is associated with that view. How about that as an answer? I don't know. So they want you to add some code, and again, you're adding the following line to the end of the Viewdidload function. So again, here's our function right here. Even I added it before the super view here when I did it, and it seemed to work fine. So I did the print, and then of course it's just calling to the console, and it's view controller view did load, and basically I said, okay, well then run your app and see what happens. So all we did was put a print function in here to print to the console. Basically they're showing you, okay, here it is. You run your app. This view is going to be loaded. It's the first view. It's the only view. And I have to run my app sideways because I don't fit on my screen, if you remember that. And so then if you come down here to the console, you'll see view controller Viewdidload is printed right here. Okay, so hey, we got to this point. The app went through and boom, it loaded. Okay, so let's go and try some other ones. Again, there's some other ones that you will see. View will appear and so on. So this line will print the console the string view controller did load anytime Viewdidload is called. So we know, hey, it's been called. Build and run your app, we already did, and you'll see it. So second, some other events that you might have. Some units of work may only be performed one time. For example, updating a label's font, text, or color. For those tasks, Viewdidload is the most appropriate place to do it. For work that will be performed multiple times, your app can rely on view events notifications. When the visible of its view changes, a view controller will automatically call its lifecycle method, allowing you to respond to the change in the view state. These methods include view will appear, view did appear, view will disappear, and view did disappear. So there's 4 of them there. So let's look at some of them and how you might use these other ones and the plain one here. Again, mostly because you might need to perform things that aren't necessarily, hey, the view loaded. You want something to happen all the time. Maybe an animation needs to be constantly updated or something like that. So you need to call other things. So let's look at some of those. So take a look at the documentation. You may note that these methods require you to call the superclass version of some point in your implementation. One way to understand why this needs to happen is to think of the following. When you write your custom view controller subclass and you want to use lifecycle methods including Viewdidload, you will get an error if you don't use the override. Again, here's the override. And why do we use the override? Well, because there's multiple Viewdidloads and doesn't know which one, is the way I'm assuming. This is because the superclass already contains definitions for these methods. Using the override keyword overrides implementations in the superclass view controller, UI view controller in this case, allowing your implementation of this method to be executed instead of the superclass implementation. So that's just the point there. Okay, let's look at the documentation, and let's just look at some of them. we got view will appear. Nope, view will appear. Called after the title bar accessory view controller's view has been loaded into memory, is about to be added to the view hierarchy in the window. This method is called when the accessory view is about to be added to the Windows view hierarchy and is about to become visible, such as coming to the front or becoming unhidden. If you override this method, you must call super in your implementation. So, again, will appear is something that you can have happen before the view is displayed. So maybe you're getting ready for something to be on the screen, I guess is what they're trying to say. Let's try another one. View did appear. Called when the title bar accessory view controller's view is fully transitioned onto the screen. This method is called after the completion of all drawing and animations involved in the initial appearance of the accessory view. You can override this method to perform tasks appropriate for that time, such as work that should not interfere with the presentation animation or starting an animation that you want to begin after the view appears, but you must call super in your implementation. So again, this is something that can be called after all the stuff has been presented on the screen, and something that you want to happen. And their example would be an animation, maybe. The next one is the view will disappear. Will disappear. Notifies the view controller that its view is about to be removed from the view hierarchy. If true, the disappearance of the view is being animated. This method is called in response to a view being removed from a view hierarchy. This method is called before the view is actually removed and before any animations are configured. Again, they have to put the word animated in there with the underline and so on. So, and then the last one is view did disappear. Did disappear? Disappear. There we go. Called after the title bar accessory view controller view is removed from the window view hierarchy. You can override this method to perform tasks associated with removing the title bar accessory view controller view from the Windows view hierarchy, such as releasing resources not needed when the view is not visible or no longer part of the window, but you must call super in your implementation. So those are some ways that you could use that. Okay, so let's move on. So, however, since you don't know the implementation of the view UI view controller lifecycles method, you could be creating unexpected issues by not letting the superclass code run. The UI view controller could be doing important work that your app needs to function properly. To fix this, you can explicitly call the superclass version of the method using the super keyword. Now both your code and your UI controller code will run. Generally, the call to superclass implementation would be the first line of your override method. And as you can see there, that's where we have the override here. Again, to get to the code, you can click right here. And we have it right here. Override function Viewdidload, or view will appear. Super, right here, they have the super, will appear animated. Again, I don't know what the animated is for. After the view did load, the next method in the view controller lifecycle is view will appear. This is called right before the view appears on the screen. This is an excellent place to add work that needs to be performed before the view is displayed. And every time it's displayed to the user, for example, if your view displays information relative to the user's location, you may want to request the location and view will appear. That way the view can be updated to take advantage of the new location. Other tasks include starting network requests, refreshing or updating views such as status bar, navigation bar, or view tabs, or adding new screen orientations. Again, I think they're talking about when they say screen orientation. I think when you rotate, something needs to take place maybe. As you expect, the view did appear is called after the view appears on the screen. if your work needs to be performed each time the view appears, but may require more than a couple of seconds, you want to place it in the view did appear. This way your view will display quickly as your function continues to execute. Use the view did appear method for starting an animation for other long running code such as fetching data. So their recommendation is to possibly use it for animation or maybe database. To continue exploring the lifecycle, override function will appear. Override function will view appear, animated boolean. Since you're writing your own custom implementation of view will appear, don't forget to call the superclass version of view will appear, since the call view will appear requires the animated property, so you can pass along the parameters given the subclass. So they want you to write a couple of these. We have Viewdidload. We already wrote that one right there, right? So we can do another one. Let's try the override. Override function, and view will appear, and then they have an underscore space animated, and then that's a boolean. And then we need to call the super view will appear, capital O, view will appear, and then animated, and then we can put our print in there. Got to put a square brackets. And then print. Well, we'll do that before the super. And what are we printing? View will appear. View controller. View will appear. And so again, just like the Viewdidload, you can add it into your code. Make sure you use the override. You have a super for your call there. And if we play it, you'll have view will appear there. So they're just showing you the hierarchy of where the structure is, right? Okay. So, and then they have another one, of course, will appear. And instead of typing all that, I'm just going to copy it. I'm not going to type all that again. We'll copy it. And so we're not doing did appear is what the next one. Did appear. And then this one would be did. And then they have did. Then, of course, we have did here, did appear. So this will, this is did. If we run it again, we should have 3 of them now. Of course, the first one is the, no, it's not running. Something's running. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we have 3 of them. You'll notice that the view did load, like it is on the bottom of page 380 there. First you have view did load, then you have view will appear, and then view did appear. So again, it's just very simple, but the concepts are there that you may need to put code in different areas depending upon what you're trying to do. That's what they're kind of talking about. Okay, let's go do a little bit more complex. So this was really basic, simple. Hopefully you understand. And of course they have the disappear as well. The problem with the disappear is you really can't test it because you need to test it if you're going to go to another view controller. So the next step is to make 2 view controllers, and then we can test the disappear because then we'll go to another view controller. So that's what they talk about on page 381. You probably guessed that the view will disappear is called before the view disappears from the screen. This method executes when the user navigates away from the screen by tapping the back button, switching tabs, or presenting or dismissing a model screen. You can also use the view will disappear method for saving edits, hiding keyboard, or canceling network request. The last method in the lifecycle is view disappear, which is called after the view disappears from the screen, typical after the user has navigated to a new view. If this method executes, it's certain the view has disappeared. As such, the method gives you opportunity to stop services related to the view, for example, playing audio, just like my audio example before, and so on. Now take a moment to return to the lifecycle project in your view controller class. Add and override the will and did functions for the disappearance view event, and print statements so that you can see the lifecycle events. For your view to disappear, you'll need to add a second view controller, otherwise there will be no way to navigate away. So let's move on. So in this next section, we actually build a little app that has 2 views. So let me quit the simulator here. So I'm going to keep this code here. I have a main storyboard right here. So I'm going to add a tab view because you guys all loved the tab view from last class. I hope you did love it because I thought it was much very nice too. So again, one way to add the tab view here is to go underneath the, so I have this selected, right? I have this selected. Again, under the editor, you can say embed in tab bar controller. That way we can have 2 tabs, or two view controllers. So I'm just going to add that in. Of course, we have our tab view now. And we have 1, right? So we have 1 view controller with 1 thing. So again, we're going to add a second one. If you remember how to add a second view controller, down here in the corner down here, you can add a second view controller. So I'm going to add that second view controller by dragging it onto the screen. I'm going to kind of put it right underneath there. But of course, we need to be able to tab and go to this view controller. If you remember from last class, how do we go to this view controller? We can do that by using the control click. If you remember from last class, we could go back to the tab bar controller, this one right there. If you remember, we held down the control key on the keyboard, right? And we click and drag onto there. Now we have a new navigational element to that one. And we're going to do view controllers, if you remember from last class, right? Right there, view controllers. And now we have, of course, 2 tabs, and so now we can test our whatever. View did disappear, or view did, you get the idea. Okay, you ready? You're ready? But do you remember that from last class? I hope you did. I did it quickly. Okay, so it's very easy to add another view controller. But of course, we can't do any programming on here unless we make a Swift file, right? Maybe the Cocoa Touch. So let's make another Cocoa Touch for this one. And of course, the book calls it tells you to name it second view controller. So to make our second view controller, we're going to go under new file, right? New file. And we're going to go Cocoa Touch. We're going to say next. We're going to name it second view, and it's going to be a UI view controller. Yes. And we're going to call it second, S-E-C-O-N-D. So we have a second view controller. And we're going to say next. And it's going to come up with our folder where you want to save it. We're saving it in our life cycle. And we're going to hit create. And of course, you'll notice I got my second view controller here. Now we need to tell that view controller that we just made to use this one. Remember that spot where I was saying, hey, you remember this is very important space. Remember that? So again, here we go. We're going to go back to the main storyboard. We're going to make sure this is selected. As you can see, it is selected. It is blue. I'm going to go to this one over here. Remember the identity inspector right there? Identity inspector. And in there, we're going to do the second view controller. Boom, right there. So again, right here is telling, hey, this is the programming for this, right? If I click here, it's going to have different programming. It's going to have the first one, the default view controller, right? This is default view controller. This is the second view controller there. So I'm pretty much ready to program my implementation. I have 2 tabs that can jump back and forth between each view controller. And remember last class we made a little icon that goes in there as well. And you can make any icon you want. I'll pause for just a minute. Maybe. So again, we have 2 view controllers now. This people call me every day, and I block their number, and then they keep calling back, and I block their number. Well, they basically changed the last 4 digits. It still says 506. Okay, sorry. They want to sell me solar panels. You guys get the solar panel call? All the solar panels. And then they yell at me, why don't you want solar panels, they say to me. I'm like, I don't want solar panels. My roof is old, and I need to replace it probably in the next 5 years or so. I don't want to put solar panels on a roof that needs to, I'd have to replace it before I put solar panels on. Oh, we do that too, they say. I bet you do. Okay, let's continue. I'm sorry to complain about that. So again, basically we're going to transition between the 2 view controllers and look at how the things are loaded, basically. You'll use the lifecycle method second view controller as well. Go back to your second view controller class file and add the same 5 cycles. We didn't do the disappear yet. They said 5 cycles. We only have 3. So let's go to the first one. They want us to add the other ones that we didn't do, the disappear, right? So we have view will disappear and view did disappear. So I'm going to kind of copy these 2 that. So I went back to the first view controller, right? We need to get. So I'm going back to this. I'm going to copy these, and it's basically very similar. We're going to put them right below that because we have 5 of them now. And again, this would be view will disappear, and it's disappear with a capital D. Is it? Yeah, and a lowercase a. So make sure you get the spelling right. Disappear. And then this was did disappear. Like that. So again, you're going to change this to disappear in the message as well. Disappear in the message. And same in the message here. Disappear. As well as here in the super call, it's going to be disappear, as well as here in this super here, disappear. So again, so we have 5 of them. Of course, the one we always have is of course Viewdidload. That's kind of default. But now we have one called view will appear, view will appear, view did appear, view did appear, view will disappear, view did disappear, and so on. So we have 5 of them. They're all with the animated call here. All with the animated Boolean logic. So what they tell you after you do all that, they say, hey, copy this. So I'm going to go and copy. You don't need the Viewdidload because that's already in the other one. We just need to, well, I guess we could copy that if you want to. We can copy all these if you want. All the way up to override. We just override the other one. So again, Command C. Copy that. I'm going to go to my second view controller, and I'm going to go and paste it in there like that. Notice it says second view controller up there as well, and so I just put them in there like that. So both of them have the same 5 calls. Does that make sense? I'll pause for a minute again. Now that we have 2 view controllers with 2 views with 2 of the same exact thing, we can go and program some examples to see it. So I'm going to continue here in the handout. drag a view controller from the object library. We already did that, and we already did that part. Oh, we already made the Cocoa Touch. We already made the second view controller. We put it in our folder. We have that. Notice how they have the diagram in their storyboard. Here, let's do our storyboard like theirs. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and basically they have it like that. There we go. Maybe make it easier for you to see. Do you see that at the top of on page 382? They have theirs looking like that. Hey, I made mine look like that as well. Okay. So let's continue. Build and run your app without clicking anything. You should see the view controller instance is loaded and appears and both appear methods have been called. Okay, so let's run it. Let's see what happens. I'm telling you to run. Let's see what happens. Here we go. It's launching. We have these view did appear, but of course we don't have any disappear yet. I don't know. Do you think it'll happen if I click the item? Let's try it. Oh, what happened? Well, we got some disappearing action going on down here. Look at what we have now. We had view did load, view will appear, view did appear. Then it says view did load, view will appear, view will disappear. View did disappear, view did appear. Okay, so why do we have multiple loads here and appears? So let's read. But why don't you see any prints from second view controller or storyboard initialize the second view controller? So what's happening? Why hasn't the view loaded? The view controller won't load its view until the view needs to be displayed, which I clicked and it did display it, and that's a good thing. But by delaying the loading, the app is conserving memory, which is limited resource in the mobile environment. To load the second view controller instance, return to simulator and click the tab, which I just did. I clicked the tab. The second view controller. At this point, you should see the following print statements in the order, and this is what we're looking at. Here's the order. Their order is pretty much the same, right? We got view. Here we go. Let's read it. View did load. View will appear. View did appear. View did load second view controller. This is for the second view controller right here. We probably could change the name, right, in the print statement so we know. Here, let's do that. That'll make our lives easier maybe. Let's quit the simulator for just a minute. I'm going to go back to my second view controller and let's change the name, the message that is in here to say second. I'm gonna put the word second in there. Second. So in the second view controller, I'm gonna put the word second in there so I know which one is being loaded at what time. Okay. That way they're not the same, right? Okay, so we have and they did second in theirs, it looks like. I don't know. Whatever. But this will give us an idea of which one is second and which one is first. If that makes any sense. Right? All I did in the print message that is there, I just added the word second in there. So now if we let's test now. There we go. We're gonna test now. And then we have our simulator coming. And then again, we have view did load, view will appear, and then of course, as soon as we click the second item here, you go to the second view controller, and let's see what happens. Okay, so let's go over here. So let's look again. The view did load, view will appear, view did appear, view will appear. Then the second view controller loaded, yes. Then the second view controller appear. And then it automatically went to view did disappear. The view will disappear, view controller. And view did disappear, second view did appear. So it looks like it went from the first one and it does the second load and a second appear before it does the disappear of the first one. Do you see that? So it looks like the load and the appear of the second one is called before the first one's even disappeared. I guess the reason why is that it's preparing to load, because then at the very bottom, hey, the second one has appeared. Okay, so I guess it's a hierarchical of you doing your data. Switch back to the first tab. Oh, we didn't do that yet. Let's try it. Let's switch back to the first tab, and it does the same thing as the first should do. Yeah. So then your view will appear. It does just the opposite. That makes sense. It just did the opposite. The order in which these functions are called helps to explain how views are added and removed from the view hierarchy. If a view controller is being added to the hierarchy, first ensure that the view has been loaded. If not, load the view triggered Viewdidload. Yes. Before building the view controller view into the hierarchy trigger, view will appear. Remove the view that are no longer displayed, triggering the view will disappear, and Viewdidappear method. Display the new view, triggering Viewdidappear. As you can see, there's no way to use the view controller lifecycle method. No one way. Each one is simply a notification that the view event has taken place. Using this guide, you as a developer will figure out the best to take advantage of each of these methods for a particular task. So again, they gave you some examples of how you might do that. Maybe the animation, you need to load, like if you do an animation that has multiple images that are going to be cycled, wouldn't you want them to be in memory before it appears on the screen, right? Where would we do that? Well, you might do it in the disappear maybe before you get to the appear. I don't know. And so then they have a challenge option here. And they want you just to do some examples of doing this with a label.